3.
Welcome to IHIP News, where Pumps and I share our opinion about the news that is important to us. Today, we are going to launch a series called Republicans Hate America. And this is going to be part 1 of the series. And we are going to pinpoint this and spell this out for the people in the back. The abject hypocrisy within the Republican Party. And do not be fooled. The Republican Party is MAGA, and MAGA are Republicans. The last 3 presidential cycles, they have nominated the same anti-American, anti-freedom man that is Donald John Trump.
Pro-fascism,
pro-dictator, pro-fuckery. All right?
Absolutely.
Our first point in this series is going to be a fact that we all know, and it is that Republicans hate the military. And Pumps and I live in Oklahoma, and you see a lot of people talk about, we support our troops, we love our troops. They stand up when the national anthem is played. They're basically almost crying. Yet when they go to the ballot box, they vote for a party that never seems to fund our veterans, that always gets cut out of all of these bills. They have no problem funding the war and the bombs and the military-industrial complex, but the people whom they recruit from poor neighborhoods, from lower-income neighborhoods, when they go out and bravely serve, which so many of these Republican politicians got deferments and didn't serve, when they go out and serve and come back and they have PTSD, exposure to toxins, disabilities, they don't give a shit. They don't give a shit about our troops. But most importantly, you have to know that Republicans hate the military because they have nominated 3 election cycles in a row a man who calls veterans that were killed in action suckers and losers.
He also refused to go to Arlington National Cemetery to honor the troops at one point during his presidency because it was raining and he didn't want it to mess up the bird's nest on his head that he calls hair.
Or his makeup.
Or his god-awful drag makeup.
And don't forget that John McCain, who was a Republican, whom I did not vote for, but who was a really decent person. And he was a POW. And for many years in Vietnam. And Trump called him a loser. So we cannot let the modern day Republican Party, which, as we all know, is the cult of MAGA, grandstand and parade around and gaslight like they give a shit about veterans, because they don't. And we know this because you do not nominate a man for 3 election cycles that calls veterans losers, suckers. And it's been widely reported that when he was in office, when he would have meetings with the generals about the state of the American Department of Defense, he called it boring and kind of flipped through his tweets. And he felt like they should be his own personal goon squad.
What have they done for me lately is how he feels about it. Another thing that the Republicans do that people might recall was the funding for the veterans exposed to toxic chemicals. And the Republicans just flat out refused to fund that on several occasions until Jon Stewart got involved. And finally, they advanced it because the pressure on the Republican Party from the public outcry because of Jon Stewart continuing to state the facts and talk about how they were leaving behind their military. It was only after they were shamed by a celebrity did they pass bills for veterans that were exposed to burn pits.
So think about this. If you were to hear MAGA supporters or MAGA politicians, they get very emotional when they talk about our troops and how much they love them. But the facts are the opposite of how they feign concern. You have an American comedian Jon Stewart, who goes out and practically loses his mind begging for these Republicans to show that they give a shit about these veterans. Finally, after they blocked it, finally they got it passed. But you would think, based on their words, that they would be first in line to support the troops. Another issue is the Republicans are always holding funding to Ukraine hostage. That is not supporting American troops, because if Ukraine falls, the next country that Putin is going to attack is going to be a NATO country. That immediately involves our troops. So not funding, playing fuck around with Ukraine war funding is the opposite of supporting American troops. And everybody who cares about the troops and understands complex, nuanced thoughts knows this. But if you listen to the modern day Republican Party, Trump's party, if you listen to them, they act like Russia is this great place.
It's amazing to me that Russia and Putin are now idolized. Like, oh, they've got a good thing going there. The fascism is leaking into the Republican Party. Majority of Republicans now will say they'd rather have Putin be the president than Biden if Trump can't win. They don't realize he is a murderous dictator.
Anti-American. He is our adversary.
And always has been.
And the fact that they can sit there with a straight face after we have all seen the shit that Trump, people inside his cabinet have confirmed that these are his words. These aren't Democrats accusing him of being anti-military. These are Republicans accusing him of being anti-military. Multiple witnesses saying that he demeans the military. Why would anybody want to do that? I don't get it. They go over there and get killed or get wounded. What a bunch of suckers. Right. What a bunch of losers. And every single person that votes Republican, at least own it. Own that you don't give a shit about the military. You want to vote for Trump? Swing for the fences. But do not walk around being duplicitous like you're this big gung-ho with your sticker on your big truck with the ball sack on it. I support our troops. Because if you vote Republican, you do not support the troops. Being pro-Trump is anti-troop. Being pro-Russia and pro-Putin and anti-Ukraine is anti-troops. So stop it, because what the Republican Party does goes out into poverty-stricken neighborhoods and offers these young men and women an opportunity to get out of those neighborhoods and have a career. And good on them. Good on these kids that are brave enough to do that. But it's not the Donald Trumps. It's not Don Jr. It's not Eric.
No.
Sure as fuck isn't Ivanka or Tiffany out there on the front lines fighting this war. These are people who on Trump's side would call real Americans. They go over there, they get mental problems, exposed to toxins, they get disabled, and they come back and they need medical care. And the same party that claims to love the troops and all of the MAGA universe that does all of the, oh, say, can you see, to our national anthem, that are nearly in tears at any baseball game or basketball game, they march to the voting booth and act like they're supporting the troops. And we've had it. I mean, it is duplicity at its finest. Next up on why Republicans hate America is Republicans are anti-life. And we know this for a multitude of reasons. But the first one is how the Republicans, time and time again, embrace violence.
Right.
You saw this on January 6th, among many other times, and all over social media currently right now. The embrace of violence by the Republican Party is breathtaking.
And you know what always strikes me ever since Trump was in office? He has never come out and said political violence is unacceptable. Peaceful protest is what it requires, but there cannot be violence. He never says that because he likes it.
He likes
the violence. He likes that his supporters send death threats to people, walk around with gallows.
He staged this, and They were shouting, hang Mike Pence.
His vice president.
Republican cannibalism at its finest. None of this is pro-life. And all of these people, if you were to go to January 6th and interview all of them, and you said, ask the question, hey, is Jesus your homeboy? That I'll be like, oh yeah, I love Christ and being Christ-like. It is all bullshit. It is, these people are in a cult and there are millions of them. And this is a death cult. If they don't get what they want and what their leader wants, let's just start popping people off, starting with Mike Pence. And I don't like Mike Pence, but I like America. And I like the idea that we are trying to be better. The Republican Party hates America. And you can be a Trumper. You can do all the, double jack off dancing with Trump that you want to. But do not run around saying that you are pro-Constitution, pro-America, and pro-democracy when you support everything that is antithetical to the list that I just gave. But another reason that we know that Republicans are anti-life is because they love guns.
Absolutely.
And guns right now in the United States of America, for all of these pro-life, pro-Jesus, pro-God, faith and country and all this bullshit, guns kill kids. It's not cancer. It's not disease. It's not car wrecks. The number one killer, if you have a child in the United States of America, is a gun. Well, if you were to just listen to Fox News, they talk about how pro-life they are, how pro-family they are, how pro-children they are. They're lying. They do not like life. And apparently they like capitalism and the gun lobby far more than they like kids.
What they are is pro-birth. They want you to be born, but after you're born, they could give two shits.
They're pro-controlling women and demeaning women because in their mind, if a woman has a child, she's less fuckable. And that just removes one other person from making them feel guilty because they've grown up in this toxic religious megachurch cycle. But the gun culture in America and the party that embraces it the most is the Republican Party.
They send thoughts and prayers at the deaths of children, but they don't do any common sense gun legislation. In fact, they strongly oppose it.
Our politicians that say that they are so pro-Jesus and so pro-life take Christmas cards with their very young elementary school age children with AR-15s and post it on the internet. So do not, you want to be pro-gun? I'm going to fight for your right to believe whatever you want to believe, but quit calling yourself pro-life. You are anti-life, and thus you hate America, because the country that I think about when I think about being born here, I think that we should promote justice and promote ways for people to live and stay alive. The Republican Party, every time I look, seems like they just want to push people down and starting to appear like a death cult to me.
It's absolutely unbelievable, the lack of self-awareness and ability to control any type of decent gun reform.
Here's another example of how the Republican Party is anti-life. They refuse to listen to global, decades-long scientific consensus that carbon emissions are melting the polar caps and thus warming the planet. This causes death. If you're so pro-life and so pro, this is God's earth and we have to be, good ambassadors to it, you would not ignore the science. You ignore the science because you care more about money for your life in this moment right now than you do the longevity of our species and the longevity of our planet. And it's another point that you don't give a fuck about kids, because where's the planet going to be in 75 to 100 years from now for all the kids that you forced all these women to birth? Another reason we know Republicans are anti-life is because they're anti-regulation. And from a personal point, my husband suffered from an opioid addiction. And the federal government allows corporations to run amok and exploit and use predatory-like capitalism on people that causes great deaths. Hundreds, thousands of Americans died during the opioid epidemic. And you can look at, clean water regulations. You can look at bridges that aren't inspected, or Boeing where, stuff's falling off of planes. Regulation saves lives and keeps capitalism at check. So if you want to be a big Christian, you want to be a big Republican, you want to be a big MAGA, swing for the fences. Quit calling yourself pro-life. You're not voting for life. Your vote is risking the lives of millions and millions of Americans that you claim you love, particularly younger and older and the most vulnerable.
What also drives me crazy about the Republican pro-birth party is they want to force women to have children that are unwanted, unplanned, but they don't want to provide any type of child care. They don't want to provide any type of social safety net. And for example, in our home state of Oklahoma, the federal government came in and said, we will subsidize every child in this state to have a free lunch.
During the summer,
so that we know that these children are being fed. Because by God, we're an abortion ban America, so they have to be born. So we'll make sure they're fed. And our governor, for reasons beyond my comprehension, said, no, we don't want it. We'd rather have kids starve. It blows my mind how you can be so pro-life when actually once the child's born, you don't give a fuck.
No.
You don't want to spend any money on him. I've often thought if every child, if they wanted to ban abortion but had to say, okay, so I'm having an unwanted pregnancy, so we're going to give you free lunches, child care, we're going to give you all those services, those Republicans would do a U-turn on that immediately because they don't want to spend the money.
No, and more insidious is how badly they ridicule people in need.
Absolutely.
There is a cruelty to the Republican Party that is really sociopathic, in my opinion, and lacks empathy. George W. Bush acknowledged this in a way where he rolled out his compassionate conservatism because he knew that was a problem because the policies were not compassionate at all and void of any empathy. But now Trump's lifted any sort of veil that they're compassionate. That's all lifted now. So if you're consciously voting for Donald Trump, be aware that you are voting for the most anti-life politician I've ever seen. The Republican Party has been anti-life for a long time, but now it is even worse, where they wanted to hang their own vice president. But they demean people that are on food stamps. I had a girl that worked for me once, and I remember her ridiculing. She said, yeah, I was in line at the grocery store, and this woman in front of me was on like food stamps, and she just bought a bunch of junk food. And that's all that Fox News, indoctrination, republicanism, where they want to ridicule people. And it is a large-scale cult that is seeking to be in control of the military, all of the nukes. And every time these politicians open their mouth, it is hypocrisy layered on top of hypocrisy. They can call themselves Christians. I don't give a shit. They can say they're pro-life. That's where I'm going to start having a problem.
That's right.
Because your policies are anti-life. And I think we have to keep pointing this out again and again. The Republican Party has been building up to this point for many, many decades. And we've finally arrived at the apex of this shit. And they finally have their, what do they call him? The imperfect vessel. And in many ways, it's refreshing to see them like their hypocrisy completely.
Right, the veil's off.
Yes. And Trump has exposed them for the hypocrites. We've all always known that they are. But the bullshit that so many everyday Americans act like they are pro-business, therefore they vote Republican, is the biggest lie ever. This party is about pro-business for very, very few people. I'm talking a handful.
Fraction of a percentage of the population.
They do not support the military. They support the military-industrial complex, but they do not support the men and women that serve. And this party does not, under any circumstances whatsoever, support life.
Could not agree more.
And one final point, how we know that the Republican Party opposes life, is what a fight it is for people in one of the richest countries in the world to access healthcare. And to any American listening here, this has just been such a part of our life. It sounds normal to you to get insurance and how expensive it is. In any other first world country, their jaws, even conservatives in other countries, their jaws are on the floor that this isn't a right provided to its citizens. It is so immoral. And yet we are one of the most religious first world countries in the world. Yet we fall so short on taking care of the most vulnerable members of this country. And to me, in my opinion, the one thing that everybody came over here to have freedom from, religion, if we do not act and we do not keep exposing this, religion will swallow this entire country up off a cliff into full-blown Christian nationalism, fascism. And these religious people are so indoctrinated. It is very important, because we are on the edge of fascism, to start having very serious conversations with everybody that everyone knows about the glaring hypocrisies in what they say their, quote, Lord and Savior wants them to do and how they vote, because they are antithetical to one another. All right, this is episode 1 of our new Firebrand series, Republicans Hate America. We only covered 2 points.
We got lots.
There's a lot to go, so we will be dropping these in on Mondays and Fridays, and we will see you soon.
It's so entertaining. Tap the vein. So